The moon casts a pale, ghostly glow over the forest, its silver light barely penetrating the dense canopy of twisted trees. Noah's footsteps crunch on the dead leaves scattered across the forest floor, the only sound in the heavy silence that surrounds him. Every step seems to echo, as though the forest itself is listening, holding its breath. Then, as he rounds a bend in the path, he sees it, a massive, ancient tree towering over everything else, its silhouette monstrous against the night sky. This is no ordinary tree. It's the tree of sacrifice, the one whispered about in hushed tones by locals who swore never to venture near it, especially under the cover of night. The tree's bark is dark, almost black, twisted in unnatural, grotesque shapes. Knots and cracks form patterns that, to Noah, seem disturbingly like faces twisted in agony, mouths frozen in silent screams. Red sap oozes from gashes in the bark, thick and viscous, trickling down like blood. Noah feels an almost magnetic pull toward the tree, a force that seems to reach out from within, wrapping around his mind like invisible fingers. His heart races, every instinct screaming at him to turn back, but something in the depths of his subconscious urges him to continue. A faint, metallic smell fills the air, a scent he recognizes only from hospital visits and terrible childhood memories. The smell of blood. He takes another step, and the shadows seem to shift, moving like black, smoky tendrils that cling to his legs. For a brief, heart-stopping moment, he sees something, or someone, within the shadows, a pale figure with hollow eyes watching him from behind the tree's massive trunk. He blinks, and it's gone, leaving him questioning if he saw anything at all. The wind picks up, sending a low, guttural moan through the branches, and he swears he can hear his name whispered faintly in the breeze. Noah, Noah. The sound is chilling, like the voice of someone long dead, reaching out to him from beyond. As he approaches, he notices markings carved into the bark, symbols and names scraped with what looks like desperate, trembling hands. The symbols seem to shift, like they're alive, writhing under his gaze. One name catches his attention, Elizabeth. The sight of the name sends a jolt through him. It's the same name as his grandmother, who had warned him about the cursed tree in stories told late at night. She had said the tree was hungry, that it demanded sacrifices from those who dared to look upon it. Noah remembers her eyes, wide and haunted, as she told him the legend. He had laughed it off then, but standing here now, facing this monstrous thing, the memory sends a chill down his spine. He reaches out, almost in a trance, his fingers hovering inches from the bark. The red sap drips down, almost touching his skin, and he feels a sharp, unexplainable pang of fear in his chest. Then, suddenly, the shadows around the tree seem to thicken, creeping towards him like a dark, living fog. He pulls his hand back, heart pounding as he realizes he's not alone. There's a presence here, something ancient, something malevolent that feels his fear, feeds on it. A whisper, barely audible, echoes in his ear, so close it feels like hot breath on his neck. You should have never come. As Noah stands in the shadow of the ancient tree, a distant memory begins to claw its way to the surface, one he'd tried to bury long ago. His mind drifts back to the nights he'd spent with his grandmother, her voice soft but trembling as she whispered dark tales about the tree. Stay away from a forest, Noah. There are things that hunger for souls like ours, she'd say, her gaze darting to the window as if she expected something to be watching. He'd laugh, dismissing her as superstitious, but deep down, her words had always planted seeds of fear, seeds that now, in this moment, have taken root and bloomed. In his pocket, his fingers graze the edge of an old amulet, a small, crudely carved charm that his grandmother had given him years ago. She had insisted he keep it with him at all times, calling it his protection. At the time, he thought it was merely sentimental, a relic from her strange beliefs. But now, the charm feels cold to the touch, almost like ice, as though it's reacting to something in the air around him. His hand tightens around it instinctively, a small lifeline in the suffocating darkness. The chill from the amulet seeps into his skin, spreading through his veins, awakening something, a faint memory he'd almost forgotten. He remembers a lullaby, one his grandmother used to hum whenever he couldn't sleep. It had a haunting melody, filled with words that didn't seem to belong to any language he knew, words that felt like spell. Her voice comes back to him now, soft and eerie, blending with the whispers around him as if the tree itself is singing along. The lyrics were cryptic, speaking of souls swallowed by roots, of blood fed to ancient bark. He realizes with a pang of dread that the song wasn't just a lullaby. It was a warning. His grandmother had known about this place, had feared it, had tried to protect him from its pull. But he was here now, too close, and he could feel the weight of the tree's dark history pressing down on him. Suddenly, he catches sight of something glinting at the base of the tree, a small object half buried in the dirt. Curiosity and terror swirl together as he kneels, brushing away the dirt to reveal a rusty, tarnished locket. His heart skips a beat as he flips it open, revealing a faded photograph inside. The face staring back at him is unmistakable. It's his grandmother, but younger, her expression one of pure terror. Beside her in the photo is a man he doesn't recognize, but there's something familiar in his eyes, something hauntingly similar to his own. The back of the locket has a date etched into it, one that sends a chill down his spine. It's the same date his grandmother had died. The forest around him feels tighter, darker, as though the trees are closing in, sealing him into this cursed memory. He stumbles back, his fingers trembling as he holds the locket, the realization dawning on him that his family's connection to the tree is far deeper, far more insidious than he ever knew. It's as if the tree has been waiting for him, a blood debt passed down through generations, a curse that had claimed his grandmother and now seeks him as its next offering. A strange, nauseating dizziness overtakes him as visions flicker before his eyes. His grandmother's fearful face, shadows creeping toward her, her hands reaching for something just beyond his sight. Her final scream echoes in his mind, merging with the ominous whisper of the tree. Blood binds us all. Noah's heart pounds as the locket slips from his trembling fingers, falling to the ground with a dull thud. The shadows around him feel alive, stretching out like fingers reaching for his very soul. He hears a faint, desperate plea in the back of his mind, a voice that sounds hauntingly like his grandmother's, warning him to leave before it's too late. But he's paralyzed, trapped in the tree's ominous presence, unable to tear himself away. It's as if the ancient roots beneath his feet have wrapped around his legs, tethering him to this cursed place. Then, out of the shadows, a shape begins to form, a hazy, spectral figure, cloaked in darkness, but with eyes that burn like embers. It hovers before him, radiating an aura of ancient malevolence. Its voice is soft but seething with hatred, filling the air with a chill that bites through his skin. "The blood of your family binds you to me," it whispers, its words echoing in his mind, chilling his bones. The figure tells him of the tree's hunger, its need for souls bound by ancient pacts, and of the sacrifices made by his ancestors to keep the dark entity contained within it. But the time has come, the voice hisses, for Noah to make his own offering. Noah's mind races as he realizes the weight of the choice before him. The entity demands a sacrifice, something more precious than anything he has ever lost. He must either surrender his last memory of his grandmother, the warm, comforting image of her that keeps him tethered to sanity, or offer a piece of his soul to satisfy the tree's hunger. The memory of his grandmother, her love, her laughter, her guidance. It's all he has left of her, a light in the darkness of his past. Letting it go would mean erasing her from his heart forever, leaving an empty void that nothing could ever fill. But the alternative is even more horrifying. Surrendering a fragment of his soul, an irreversible act that would bind him to this cursed tree, forever haunted, neither fully alive nor dead. The air grows colder, pressing down on him like the weight of the entire forest. He can feel the entity's impatience, a gnawing, ravenous energy pulsing from the tree, a hunger that seems endless. The roots around him tighten, digging into his skin, as if the tree itself is eager to consume whatever he chooses to offer. He feels his mind slipping, the edges of his sanity fraying as the tree's dark power seeps into him, twisting his thoughts, clouding his vision. In a moment of desperation, he clutches his grandmother's amulet, the only anchor he has left to the world he once knew, and closes his eyes, trying to block out the voice, the shadows, the pull of the tree. But the voice won't relent. It taunts him, showing him visions of what his future will look like if he surrenders a part of his soul. He sees himself, hollow-eyed and broken, wandering the forest, his body twisted and frail, his mind lost to the tree's insatiable darkness. Yet in the same instant, he glimpses an alternate future, one where he lets go of his grandmother's memory, a future where he is free from the tree, but alone, haunted by the hollow absence of the one person he loved most. It's a cruel paradox, a fate as twisted as the roots that bind him, and he realizes that no matter what he chooses, he will lose something invaluable. Noah opens his eyes, heart pounding, as he looks up at the figure looming over him. The shadows around the tree writhe in anticipation, and he feels the entity's gaze searing into him, waiting, hungering for his decision. His throat is dry, his mind torn, the impossible choice gnawing at him like a blade. He knows that whatever he decides, he will be forever marked by this night, his life changed in ways he can scarcely comprehend. Finally, with a voice that trembles but holds a hint of resolve, he speaks his decision aloud, offering up either his most cherished memory or a piece of his very soul, the last sacrifice to a curse that has plagued his family for generations. The forest falls silent, the air thick with tension as the entity accepts his offering. Noah's voice fades into the chilling silence, swallowed by the darkness pressing in around him. The entity's form dissolves into a thick, inky mist, and for a moment, he feels an eerie calm, as though the forest itself is holding its breath. But then, an unsettling sound drifts through the air, a faint whisper, barely perceptible at first, like the rustling of leaves or the murmur of distant voices. Gradually, the sound grows, rising into a symphony of whispers echoing through the trees, circling him like a tightening noose. It's as if the forest has come alive, filled with the voices of countless souls trapped within the twisted roots of the ancient tree. The whispers call his name in soft, mournful tones, voices that shift from his grandmother's gentle voice to that of strangers, some filled with sorrow, others dripping with anger and despair. Shadows stretch and warp around him, dark tendrils slithering across the ground, pulling him closer to the tree as if it craves to consume him whole. He feels the weight of unseen eyes watching him from every direction, a sensation so intense that he can barely breathe. His heart races as the whispers intensify, no longer just words, but an overwhelming cacophony of emotions, grief, rage, loneliness, all crashing over him like a wave, pulling him into their depths. As he stumbles back, his hand brushes against the bark of the tree, and a chilling shock runs up his arm. The surface feels unnaturally warm, pulsing under his fingers as if it were alive. But more than that, it feels wrong, as though countless hands were reaching out from within, clawing at his skin, desperate for release. He jerks his hand away, but the warmth lingers, a burning imprint that sears into his memory. He glances down at his palm, only to find faint, red-tinged streaks where his skin had touched the bark, marks that resemble claw-like scratches, as if the tree itself had tried to brand him, marking him as one of its own. The whispers suddenly take on a darker tone, voices laced with venom and accusation. He hears fragments of words, broken sentences filled with fury. "You are one of us now, forever bound to the roots, bound to the hunger." It feels as if each whisper is a soul that once stood where he does now, souls that fell victim to the same cursed choice, each now part of the tree's ghastly legacy. The realization makes his skin crawl. He's not just hearing them, he's feeling their anguish, their terror, each voice clawing into his mind, pulling him deeper into the darkness of their shared fate. Suddenly, the shadows around him seem to shift, forming strange, grotesque shapes. Faces begin to appear within the bark of the tree, faces twisted in pain, their hollow eyes staring at him, lips moving in silent screams. One face looks hauntingly familiar, and he realizes with horror that it resembles his grandmother, her mouth contorted in silent agony, her eyes hollow, pleading. His heart lurches as he backs away, but the faces keep coming, one after another, each one a tragic echo of those who were sacrificed to the tree. They seem to follow him, their eyes filled with an indescribable suffering that chills him to the bone. The shadows stretch further, seeping into his mind, warping his perception. The forest seems to close in on him, trees towering over him like silent, judgmental witnesses to his fear. Every branch, every leaf appears to move with sinister intent, as though the forest itself is alive, conspiring to trap him forever. He tries to scream, but his voice is swallowed by the suffocating darkness, his words dissolving into the very shadows that surround him. Panic grips his heart, and for a terrifying moment, he wonders if he, too, is becoming part of the tree's curse, his soul doomed to linger here, whispering alongside the others for eternity. Just as he feels himself slipping, losing all sense of reality, a faint light pierces the darkness, a flickering glow from his grandmother's amulet, still tucked in his pocket. Its warmth cuts through the chill, grounding him, bringing a moment of clarity to his fogged mind. The whispers fade slightly, and the shadows recoil, as though the amulet's presence is enough to keep the malevolent force at bay. But as he clutches it tightly, the tree's voice, the entity within, seems to laugh, mocking him. "It won't save you," it hisses, the words slithering through his thoughts. "You belong to me now." The forest falls silent, but he can still feel the whispers lingering just beneath the surface, like embers waiting to ignite. Each shadow seems to watch him, hungry, expectant, as if knowing that, despite his struggle, his fate is sealed. As Noah grips the amulet, his heart pounds wildly in his chest, each beat echoing like a drum in the oppressive silence of the forest. But his moment of clarity is fleeting. The shadows close in again, darker and heavier, pressing against his skin like cold, clammy hands. His vision blurs, and the forest around him begins to distort, as if he's looking through murky water. The tree's whispers return, slipping into his mind like poison, filling it with dark visions and twisting his deepest fears into something tangible, something monstrous. A figure steps out from the shadows, a twisted version of himself, his face pale and eyes hollow, an empty shell filled with malevolence. This specter of himself grins with a terrible familiarity, a grin that stretches far too wide, revealing rows of jagged, inhuman teeth. "You're already lost," it sneers, mimicking his own voice, but laced with something ancient, something foul. "You think that charm can save you? It's a lie, just like your hope. Give in, surrender to the fear, let it consume you." Noah's heart clenches, his breath hitching as the apparition steps closer, mirroring his every move with twisted mockery. As he tries to back away, his surroundings warp further, transforming into a nightmare landscape. The trees loom over him like skeletal giants, their branches curling like bony fingers, reaching for him. The ground beneath his feet becomes soft, spongy, as if he's walking on layers of decaying flesh. Each step sinks deeper, pulling him down, trapping him in the sticky, suffocating earth. Panic flares within him, clawing at his throat, but the whispers grow louder, feeding off his terror, growing stronger with each surge of fear that courses through him. The forest begins to pulse, its shadows flickering with dark shapes. Faces of those who came before, twisted in agony, their mouths stretched open in endless screams, eyes wide with terror. They surround him, drifting closer, their cold hands brushing against his skin, their touch like ice seeping into his bones. They stare at him with hollow, accusatory eyes, silently blaming him, condemning him to their fate. His grandmother's face appears among them, her features distorted, her mouth moving as if she's trying to speak. But when he listens, he hears only a garbled, inhuman scream that claws into his ears, filling him with a primal dread that makes his stomach twist. The visions deepen, showing him a twisted future, a future where he's trapped within the tree itself, roots and bark swallowing his body, his mind shattered, his soul forever bound to this cursed place. He sees himself as one of the hollow faces, doomed to watch as others come to the tree, each one falling victim to its endless hunger. The terror is so vivid, so raw, that he begins to doubt reality. Is this his future? Is this the price he must pay for trespassing into the forest? The thought clings to his mind, spreading like a disease, breaking down his last remnants of hope. Just as his mind begins to buckle under the weight of these visions, another form materializes, a young version of himself, a child trembling in fear, his eyes wide with innocence and dread. The child reaches out to him, but his small hand is shaking, his gaze filled with the pure, unfiltered terror of knowing he's helpless against what's coming. Noah feels a surge of despair as he stares into his younger self's eyes, a reflection of the vulnerability he's tried so hard to bury, now fully exposed and raw. The whispers coalesce around the child, chanting in unison, their voices growing louder, pressing against his mind with unbearable force. Fear is power, they hiss. Give in, and we'll let you rest. Resist, and we'll drag you deeper. Noah's mind spins, his resolve unraveling as he struggles to keep hold of his sanity. He feels himself slipping, the fear wrapping around him like a thick, suffocating fog, clouding his thoughts, dulling his senses. He's so close to giving in, to letting the darkness take him, to becoming one with the shadows. Yet, something within him, a fragile spark, a memory of warmth and light, fights back, refusing to let go. It's a faint, flickering defiance, but enough to remind him that he is still himself, still human, still alive. He takes a shuddering breath, clutching the amulet tighter, feeling its warmth bleed into his skin, grounding him once more. The shadows recoil slightly, hissing in frustration, and he realizes that the fear is not just a weapon against him. It's the tree's weakness. The more he gives in to terror, the stronger the tree becomes, feeding off his dread, consuming his very essence. It's a game of survival, a test of will. If he can hold on to his sanity, resist the pull of the fear, he may yet find a way to escape. But as he glances around, he knows the tree won't let him go easily. The forest watches him, waiting for him to falter, knowing that all it needs is a moment of weakness to claim him forever. With one final, desperate surge of courage, Noah forces himself to stand, his mind steeled against the dark temptations and horrific visions. He is alone, surrounded by shadows, but he has not surrendered yet. He whispers to himself, barely audible over the cacophony around him, a promise to survive, to break free. And though the whispers grow louder, the shadows pressing in with newfound fury, he refuses to let the fear take control. For now, he is still himself. Noah's determination flickers like a fragile flame in the wind, yet it's all he has as he stands before the tree, shadows closing in around him. He knows that whatever force haunts this place isn't finished with him. He's only scratched the surface of its malevolence. The tree's whispers shift, becoming sharper, almost taunting, daring him to confront the full darkness within. A shiver crawls down his spine as he realizes the whispers are not merely voices. They're alive, echoing from a consciousness that feels ancient, vast, and inescapably hostile. It's a presence that fills every inch of the forest, entwined with the roots, branches, and shadows that surround him. Suddenly, a piercing vision strikes him, flashing like lightning behind his eyes. He sees himself trapped within the tree, his body twisted and contorted, roots growing through his skin, his eyes hollow and empty, his soul bound eternally to this monstrous being. The vision is so real, so vivid, that he can feel the cold, rough bark pressing into his flesh, the damp earth beneath his feet sucking him in. His heartbeat races, a desperate drumbeat against the oppressive silence. As he clutches at the amulet, his last tether to reality. Then, out of the corner of his eye, he sees a faint shimmer, a ghostly figure stepping forward from the tree's shadow. It's his grandmother, or at least something that looks like her form pale and translucent, her eyes dark and hollow. She doesn't speak, but her gaze locks onto his, filled with an expression that sends a chill through him. Her mouth opens, and instead of words, a dark, suffocating mist spills forth, wrapping around him, pulling him closer to the tree. He can feel her sadness, her regret, as if she's trapped within this cursed existence, her soul enslaved to the tree, just as the voices had warned. In that moment, he realizes that her death wasn't natural. She, too, was claimed by the tree, bound to its hunger, a prisoner of its darkness. The entity's voice returns, hissing through the shadows with a twisted satisfaction. The curse began with your bloodline, and it will end with it, it murmurs, each word reverberating through his bones. The truth unfurls in his mind like a horrific revelation. His family has been linked to this tree for generations, a blood pact that has demanded lives in exchange for power or protection, a pact that has haunted his ancestors and will consume him unless he can break it. He feels a surge of despair, a heaviness that threatens to drown him, knowing he is part of a legacy he never chose, yet one that will destroy him if he doesn't fight back. As he stares into his grandmother's hollow eyes, he understands the final piece of the puzzle. The tree's hunger can only be satiated by a life. But there is one alternative, a dark, twisted choice. He can break the curse by willingly becoming part of it, by binding his soul to the tree, by choosing to stay and let the tree claim him of his own free will. The entity whispers to him, tempting him, promising that he can free his family if he sacrifices himself. But the cost will be unimaginable. His soul will become a part of the tree, trapped forever within its roots and bark, an eternal guardian and prisoner of its curse. Noah's heart pounds as he realizes he stands on the edge of a terrible choice. He can fight to escape, possibly condemning his family to suffer the curse in the future, or he can surrender himself, an act that would end the cycle but doom him to an eternity of torment. He feels the shadows closing in, the roots writhing at his feet, as though they sense his hesitation, eager to bind him. The ghostly figure of his grandmother watches silently, a witness to his decision, her form flickering like a candle flame, her presence both comforting and horrifying. He takes a deep breath, every nerve in his body screaming for him to run, to flee this cursed place. Yet, he knows that escaping won't truly free him. The tree's influence will haunt him, follow him wherever he goes, gnawing at his mind until he's as hollow as the other souls trapped within. With trembling hands, he raises the amulet to his chest, feeling its faint warmth against his skin, a final reminder of who he is. In that moment, he makes his choice, whispering a prayer under his breath, hoping that whatever he's about to do will end the torment that has plagued his family for centuries. A deafening silence falls over the forest as he steps toward the tree, feeling its dark energy pulse through him, welcoming him as part of its twisted legacy. He closes his eyes, feeling the roots wrap around his feet, the bark pressing against his skin, as he offers himself to the tree, an act of defiance, sacrifice, and finality. The whispers swell, a chorus of voices crying out as he surrenders, binding himself to the curse, hoping that in his sacrifice, he will find a release for those who came before him. The shadows shift, the forest breathing a sigh, as Noah becomes part of the tree's eternal darkness, sealing his fate and breaking the curse that has bound his bloodline. As Noah surrenders to the tree, the forest around him seems to shudder in anticipation, the darkness growing thicker, wrapping around him like a shroud. He feels the cold tendrils of the tree's roots curl up his legs, pulling him closer, drawing him deeper into its ancient hunger. The air turns thick and stale, suffocating, as if he's breathing in centuries of decay and sorrow. Shadows flicker at the edges of his vision, twisting and writhing, forming the faces of those claimed by the tree before him. His ancestors, bound souls with eyes hollow and desperate, watching him with both pity and resignation. Just as the tree's roots tighten their grip, He feels an intense, searing pain in his chest, as if his very soul is being torn from his body. He can sense the tree's malevolent satisfaction, a dark, primal pleasure as it begins to claim him, absorbing his essence into its twisted roots. His vision blurs, his limbs growing heavy as the life drains from him, yet he holds on to a single thought, a final act of defiance. With every ounce of strength left in him, Noah raises his grandmother's amulet, clutching it tightly, feeling its warmth pulse against his skin, a faint glimmer of hope in the overwhelming darkness. The amulet begins to glow, a small, golden light cutting through the shadows, casting a faint warmth that pushes back the tree's cold, invasive presence. The tree recoils slightly, its grip loosening just enough for Noah to take a shuddering breath. He realizes that the amulet is more than just a trinket. It's a piece of his family's legacy, a charm that holds the love and strength of those who fought the curse before him. This relic, imbued with generations of hope and defiance, is his only weapon against the tree's consuming darkness. Fueled by this realization, Noah forces himself to his feet, his body screaming in protest, every muscle aching under the oppressive weight of the tree's malevolent energy. He raises the amulet high, and as its light intensifies, he thrusts it against the bark, pressing it into one of the tree's bleeding cracks. The tree lets out a deafening, guttural roar, the sound reverberating through the forest like a beast wounded, its shadows twisting and writhing as if in agony. The faces in the bark contort, their mouths opening in silent screams, the voices of the trapped souls filling the air, a cacophony of suffering and despair. The ground trembles beneath Noah's feet, cracks snaking through the earth as the tree's roots recoil, loosening their grip, retracting back into the dark soil. He feels a surge of energy, a force that seems to rise from the very earth itself, fighting against the tree's curse. The amulet burns hot in his hand, its light spreading like wildfire, piercing the tree's dark heart, illuminating every twisted branch and decayed root. Shadows melt away, revealing glimpses of his grandmother's face, her expression softened, no longer hollow, a flicker of peace crossing her spectral features as the curse weakens. But the tree is not finished yet. It lashes out with its remaining strength, branches snapping and curling toward him like skeletal claws, desperate to reclaim him, to drag him down into its eternal darkness. Noah stumbles back, dodging the branches as they swipe at him, but one catches his arm, its bark biting into his skin, leaving a deep, bloody gash. The pain sears through him, a reminder that he is still vulnerable, still mortal. The tree's voice returns, a furious, guttural growl echoing through his mind. "You cannot escape me," it hisses. "You are mine, bound by blood, by fear, by fate." Noah grits his teeth, his fear transforming into a raw, desperate determination. "Not anymore," he whispers, pouring every ounce of strength he has left into the amulet, pressing it deeper into the tree's bark. The golden light erupts, flooding the forest, burning away the shadows, consuming the dark essence that has fed the tree for centuries. The tree shudders violently, its bark cracking, splintering, its roots shriveling as the curse that has kept it alive is destroyed. In a final, desperate act, the tree lets out a scream, a sound so deep, so filled with centuries of hatred and sorrow, that it chills Noah to his core. The roots and branches retract, retreating into the ground, and the faces in the bark begin to fade, their expressions softening as the souls trapped within are finally released. Noah watches, breathless, as the twisted form of the tree collapses, its ancient bark crumbling to ash, dissolving into the soil, taking the last remnants of its curse with it. As the forest falls silent, Noah sinks to his knees, the amulet dimming in his hand, its light fading as its purpose is fulfilled. He stares at the empty ground where the tree once stood, feeling an overwhelming sense of relief and sorrow. The curse is broken, but he knows he has paid a heavy price. The scars on his arm, the memories of shadows, the faces of the lost, All of it lingers, etched into his mind as a reminder of the horrors he has faced. The forest is quiet now, its oppressive weight lifted, but he knows he will never forget the whispers, the darkness, the moment when he stood alone against the malevolence of the tree. Noah rises slowly, his body exhausted, but his spirit unbroken. He clutches the amulet one last time, feeling a faint warmth, a final gift from his grandmother and those who came before him, a legacy of courage and resilience. As he turns to leave, he feels a presence beside him, gentle and comforting, a whisper of thanks drifting through the air, a lingering farewell from the souls he has freed. He walks out of the forest, the shadows fading behind him, knowing that he has won, but also understanding that some parts of him will remain in the woods, forever entwined with the darkness he defeated. Noah emerges from the forest as dawn begins to break, the pale light casting a soft glow over the treetops. The oppressive shadows have lifted, yet a strange silence still lingers in the air, as though the forest itself remembers what has transpired. He feels a heavy weight in his chest, a mix of relief and a lingering dread that gnaws at him, refusing to let go. The curse may be broken, and the tree reduced to nothing but ash and memories, but Noah senses that he hasn't left the darkness entirely behind. He glances back one last time, his eyes drawn to the spot where the monstrous tree once stood, its roots twisting into the earth, its bark filled with tortured faces. There, in the early morning light, he notices something small and unnatural half buried in ground, a seed, black as coal and pulsing faintly, as though it has its own heartbeat. He stares at it, a chill creeping up his spine as he realizes it looks exactly like the roots he had seen writhing in the darkness. The seed lies in the ashes, untouched by the light, as if mocking him, a sinister remnant of the tree's malignant presence. A shiver crawls over him as he reaches out to touch it, but an instinct stops him, an inner voice warning him not to disturb whatever evil remains. Yet, as he turns to leave, the faint whisper of his own name drifts through the air, carried by an unseen force. Noah. It's soft, almost imperceptible, but it's enough to make his heart skip a beat. He glances around, scanning the forest, but he's alone, utterly and completely alone. The whisper fades, but an eerie tension lingers, a reminder that he may never truly escape the influence of the curse. The seed lies dormant for now, but he knows that darkness has a way of growing, of finding new life, of lying in wait until the time is right. He realizes with a pang of horror that the tree's legacy may never truly die, that it may merely be waiting, biding its time, seeking the next unwitting soul to wander too close. As he continues down the path, he feels a strange heaviness in his pocket. Reaching in, he pulls out the amulet, now cold and lifeless, the faint warmth that had once protected him completely extinguished. It's covered in a fine layer of ash, as if it's absorbed the last remnants of the curse, but somehow it feels different. He can't shake the sense that the amulet itself now holds a fragment of the tree's darkness, a sliver of the malevolent force that had once inhabited its roots. He turns it over in his hand, feeling an unsettling chill, and for a moment he wonders if it will protect him or haunt him for the rest of his life. The further he walks from the forest, the more distorted his memories become, as though the events are slipping from his grasp, blurring at the edges, turning into something dreamlike. The faces, the whispers, the touch of the shadows, they fade but leave an indelible mark on his mind. He tells himself it's over, that the curse is broken, but the shadows cast by his memories feel longer, darker, like they're stretching into his future. He feels the weight of those who came before him, the burden of his family's cursed legacy still lingering, woven into the fabric of his blood. In a quiet, haunting way, he knows that he will never be entirely free. Days pass, and Noah finds himself plagued by strange sensations, shadows flickering just beyond his vision, whispers echoing through the quiet of his room at night. He dreams of the tree, of its twisted branches reaching out for him, of his grandmother's face frozen in a silent scream, warning him of something unseen, something that still hungers. He wakes in a cold sweat, his hand clutching the amulet around his neck, his mind racing with the fear that the tree's curse wasn't broken, only altered, twisted into something that has followed him home. One night, as he drifts off to sleep, he hears a familiar sound, a faint, rhythmic thumping, like a heartbeat. It's coming from the amulet, echoing against his chest, vibrating in time with his own pulse. He opens his eyes, staring into the darkness of his room, and the whisper returns, soft but unmistakable, his name slipping through the silence like a ghost. Noah. He sits up, heart pounding, every instinct screaming that he is not alone, that something has followed him back from the forest, a piece of the tree embedded within his very soul. With each passing day, Noah is haunted by an inescapable feeling that the tree, or whatever dark presence inhabited it, is still alive in some twisted form, hiding within the shadows of his life, watching, waiting. And though he tries to convince himself that he's free, that he's won, a part of him knows the truth. The curse has only changed, and its hunger will one day return. He wonders if he, too, will pass the amulet down, will warn another of his bloodline, hoping they'll have the courage to face the darkness and break the cycle. As he stares into the black, unyielding night, Noah understands that he will never truly escape the shadows of that cursed forest. The tree may be gone, but its roots remain deep, tangled within him, bound by blood and fear.